Good evening. My name is Joe Sam Robinson. It's my pleasure to have with us once again Dr. Buck Melton, a gentleman of great erudition and wisdom.
So you're always good for a laugh.
That's right. Thank you for being with us, Buck.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Now, we've talked about many things, and I know you've followed a lot of modern history. You've observed the way the world works. What do you think about the great power conflict that seems to be shaking out now between the U.S., China, and Russia? Any comments about that? Did you see this coming?
That's a broad question.
After the end of the Cold War, did you see this? Do you think this would ever? Had we entered Paradiso with no more struggle between nations? Nation states are all going to be friends.
Do you remember, was it Francis Fukuyama who back in 93 or 94 wrote an article, I can't even remember who he wrote the article for, but entitled The End of History?
I've heard the name.
Claiming that we're all going to be friends now and it's all going to be business as usual. And I thought at the time it was naive. And anyone who wants to look at Putin's track record for approximately the last 20 years would see this coming. 25 years even would see this coming. I mean, he's always said he's going to do just what he's doing.
Kind of like Hitler's Mein Kampf kind of thing.
Yeah,
he gave his speeches. Well, I mean, I won't get too much into it. I have a cyclical view of history, the idea of the brain being what it is. We all have our Neolithic brains. This is just the inevitability of humans. Mm-hmm. And so we really need to go to the next stage and anticipate these conflicts. But just to go through this now, I mean, it just keeps reappearing. We get through periods of often war, terrible things happen, and people repent. We're never going to have another war, the war to end all wars, no more struggle, no more controversy, and it just happens. We just get right back into the middle of it. And it appears, just observing what's going on, the rhetoric that's out there is it's getting more extreme, I would say. Now, one of the things that happened, I guess, that's pretty alarming is it was just alarming, no guess about it, no two ways. The Russian attack on the Ukraine and the way that's just being presented, that's old style, 19th century Stalinist kind of, maybe Tsar kind of behavior. This is what Peter the Great would do from past centuries. We're going to just go in there and shoot everybody and kill everybody and do whatever we have to, and then we're going to annex that area to our country. Mm-hmm. And this seems to be a repeated arrangement. Could anything have happened to avoid this event? Anything could we have done anything?
I suppose, and you really need to have the other Dr. Melton in for Eastern European and Russian stuff. But if she were here, I think she would say that it depends on how badly you wanted to stop it from happening. I think what you would have had to do would be to make Ukraine a full-on member of NATO and essentially dare Putin to do something. And then if Putin had done it, then that would have been a test as to whether NATO was a paper tiger or not at this point.
Ukraine had nuclear weapons, and they gave them up.
In reliance on our promises that we would help them out.
Well, so is that the sort of deterrent the world needs to prevent conflict? Everybody has a nuclear weapon. Ergo, nobody can do anything to anyone else. Or does that increase the chances of species-wide extinction?
Well, yes to both questions. It's not necessarily either or. That I think a very plausible argument can be made that the Cold War did not turn into a full-on World War III because both sides were afraid of the danger of escalation. On the other hand, as these things proliferate, especially by the time we get to the late 1960s, 1970s, where we have tens of thousands of them, that the chance of accident or miscalculation, as in the case of the Cuban Missile Crisis, escalates dramatically. So I think on the one hand, it reduces the danger of a deliberate escalation, but accidental or miscalculation goes way up. And there were many occasions, I can count at least 2 or maybe 3, where we really were taken almost to the brink just by miscalculation or even machine error.
Well, now, what happens sometimes in these, it's just like a game theory story, isn't it? I mean, the people that they're mathematicians in a way, they're game theory, they run different scenarios through computers, and they come up with decisions, different possibilities. In doing this, what is it that would, we have NATO there, and that in the U.S., I would say the U.S., Japanese, European NATO arrangement is the world order. That is the world order. That the amount of resources there, the viewpoints that those power groups maintain, they're touted as the path for the rest of the world. This is the rest of the world. This is the Western way. It works great. Capitalism works great. Maybe with the addendum of democratic socialism. Maybe that's another flower that's sprouting out there in the world order. But this world order is there, and it's maintaining this some kind of worldwide stability. However, in looking at the condition of the world right now, is the world order appropriately dealing with all the world's problems, all the difficulties, and all the aggrieved nations that are there? How are these disputes to be resolved? Presumably they have the World Court, there are mechanisms in place. What was it that made Russia just go off the reservation? I mean, they presumably wanted the idea is they would be welcomed into the world order. That would be they'd like to have them there. They were part of the G7, G8, I guess. I get that straight, and they were kicked out, if I could say that. And why did this happen?
Oh, well, how long have you got? The problem is that Russia has no history at all of democratic liberalism. That being there in the heart of Eurasia, being wide open to the steppes, that they have been invaded time and time again by the steppe people, and in fact by people in Central and Western Europe. Russia's been invaded something like 8 times in the last 250
years. The Swedes,
years.
even those peaceful Swedes.
Yeah, and the Poles, the Swedes, yes, not to mention Napoleon.
The Lithuanians
Yes. So without any natural borders and with no history of liberal democracy, the Russians have always seen themselves as their greatest security as, what is the old line from the Southern Planter? I don't want all the land, I just want the land that joins mine. And dating back to Peter the Great and Catherine the Great, who sort of took their cues from Western European monarchs, they tended to see themselves as sort of the bastion of European civilization against the hordes of the East.
And maybe also about the excesses of the West.
Yes.
So in other words,
Hitler,
Putin may,
for instance.
or just I don't know, the liberal policies of the West, whatever it's gender confusion, different life possibilities that are offensive to traditional people. I think that would be a fair thing to say, and a certain kind of respect for brute power, sort of a masculine kind of force that seems appropriate in some cultures.
Which Putin has very taken great pains to cultivate. You remember, not recently, he's old at this point, he's not well, but even 15 years ago, you'd see these pictures of him bare-chested working out or chopping.
I personally was not too impressed. I mean, it didn't seem like he would do well in, football or professional wrestling. But I didn't see him as a professional wrestler out there, throwing people around.
Yes, but nevertheless.
But I mean, I think there is that sort of gender thing with a little bit with I think, but the idea that this masculine force is necessary in the world, and just brute force with no backing down. It's necessary. The highest good is we just have to do this. If you're in the way, we're going to kill you.
Yes.
I mean, that's that sort of respect for that kind of power, and maybe the idea that you mentioned the vulnerability of the Russian state. And if you look at that, maybe I've said this, if you look at Russia, only more or less about 140 million people, surrounded, you could say, by enemies. You could say, starting with Alaska, which was old Russian territory, and at least I've heard it said that in the Duma, these people have said, we want Alaska back. We're going to come down and get it. Actually, I think their imperium went all the way to San Francisco, so maybe they have the feeling this is their land. Well, in any event, the U.S. is there, tremendous power facing them, and their little bear, our little friend, Canadians. I mean that in a charitable way. I mean whatever, but we're part of this alliance. You could say against them. Then you have the Japanese, who the Russians have fought several wars with, and the Japanese are people that feel like they've been mistreated by the treaties of World War II, and so they want some of their land back, and they're 125 million Japanese, almost the same number as the number of Russians, almost the same population.
And with a much better basic economy as well.
Right,
so.
and really
Our
an
standard
economy,
of living.
Yeah, that's right, an economy and a wealthy country,
Yes.
and an economy that's suited for the 21st century in a way. I mean, computers and everyone well-educated, computers, go to work on time, don't drink too much, and whatever. Good, that type of society. Then the great juggernaut, China, is there. 1.4 billion people, and the Chinese likewise have a sense of aggrievement against the Russians. Then the Russians took a lot of Chinese land on the Amur River, and then also throw in there, you've got North Korea. The nutty North Koreans are right next to Russia.
Yeah. Vladivostok is right across the border.
Very close, so that it's a pretty tough neighborhood. Then you move into Central Asia, where there's all kinds of Islamic ferment, and indeed in the Caucasus, the Chechens killed people, and there's a bloodbath, and the Russians are, as you mentioned, are traditionally suspicious of the people from the steppes, where many of these people are Islamic people. Mm-hmm. And then you moving along, then you have Turkey, a traditional enemy.
The control of the Bosphorus and access from Black Sea to the Mediterranean.
There. And then finally, you move into Europe, Western Europe, or Europe. NATO is there, and I think one of the big facts that's not talked enough about in regards to this is that the attack of NATO on Serbia, which is a traditional Russian ally. I think their flags are very similar to the Russians.
This is how World War I started.
That's right.
Yes.
That was their client state. Mm-hmm. And so the Russians this is the client state, and they were powerless. They were impotent. There's nothing they could do when Belgrade was being attacked. And you could say, there could be an argument that there was, in this complicated dispute in the Balkans, that there was some right on the side of the Serbians. The Serbians weren't necessarily all wrong in this terrible ethnic conflict. So there you go. So you're totally surrounded by everyone, with their population just decreasing, and they've got a lot of nuclear weapons, but their ability to, if the mindset is, we have to be a strong, aggressive, masculine state. We have to punch our weight. And the way that we traditionally would do that is we had such a tremendous population We had so many people, we could just send divisions over landmines and blow everyone up.
The Russian steamroller.
That's right. But now they don't have, they lack the manpower to do that in any event. They're in this difficult situation, and they've locked themselves into a bad game.
Well, even manpower aside, look at, it's been very tough going for them. So their logistics problems, their equipment problems, so they're really turning out to be a bit of a paper tiger here. The Russian army is. And
the effect is not. We don't know what the end effect will be here.
No, although as we are taping this, over the last week or so, Putin has really started hyping up again his threats, and that, I've not yet begun to fight kind of stuff, and this could be the beginning of the World War III, and so yeah.
And well, that's right. And the other issue is when you have, you could say what you like about President Joe Biden in the U.S. I won't go there, but there are plenty of checks and balances. I mean, there are plenty of checks and balances that exist to prevent anything, I think, too nutty from happening. And I hope my confidence is not misplaced, but with Putin, I mean, he's pretty much the guy, isn't he? He can pretty much do as he wishes.
Well, you start asking, would his top generals refuse an order that they see would clearly result in disaster for Russia?
They might.
And you see occasions like that.
They might.
That you see people forcibly retired at various times. So Beria, for instance, or Khrushchev is another example.
There are some sensible people.
Yes.
And I think it's important in these controversies, these great power controversies, to think, these people are nice. They're very nice people on the other side of the fence, just like U.S. people in whatever conflicts, Vietnam, or plenty of nice people here, plenty of nice people.
And they're pitted against each other by their systems.
Right, and so we shouldn't think that the Russians, and you could say maybe they're support Putin, you could say, well, maybe they're misguided, whatever, but still, they're basic humans, and it would be a mistake to demonize people. Now, in looking at this great power controversy and struggle, the huge player, I think, is China. A similar story. One great person at the top of the pyramid that pulls the levers. A tremendous history, 5,000 years of history, the Middle Kingdom, enormous human resources, a big country, a sense of national destiny, and also a sense of being weak, and the problem with being weak when the Japanese or the Western world came in the 19th century, the Opium Wars. The West, particularly the UK, were trying to force the Russians to take opium. The Chinese take opium. We're going to pull send our opium in there. We'll shoot you if you try and stop it. It would be like Mexico forcing the U.S. to accept cocaine. The U.S. is not taking enough cocaine, so we're sending Mexican gunboats into whatever it is, Brownsville, and we'll blow the place up, and New Orleans. They'll fight. Now, we won the war, now you have to take our cocaine. That's pretty awful, isn't it? Enclaves around. And then the terrible story of Japan attacking, the horrible travesties that happened that were as egregious as anything. I mean, we tend to focus on Europe and Hitler, but the Japanese behavior in China was as awful as anything we've seen.
Well, as I like to point out, the rape of Nanking in '37 made the Nazi observers there sick to their stomachs. And if you can sicken a Nazi, that's saying something. So.
That's just a terrible. Well, all right. So China is there, and this world order that I spoke about includes their ancient enemy, the Japanese. They're part of they're the American people, guys, and the Chinese fought America in the Korean War. It was Chinese guy against American guy shooting it out on the doorsteps of of China. I mean, Korea was very close. Vietnam, similar kind of controversies, similar stuff out there. And the relationship is a difficult one. I sort of have the feeling, whatever the feeling is the wrong word, that collaboration with the Chinese might be possibly more possible than at least with Putin. They have the sense of the Middle Kingdom. I don't think they seek world. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. I certainly could be, but at least there's some idea of joy of trade. It's not harmony is a big thing. Maybe I've said that before. If there's a word that is big in the West or the U.S., it would be freedom, and their word might be harmony, harmonious relationships. Maybe I'll throw that out. But how do you handle this? You've got these power dynamics here once again that threaten to really hurt people unless it is appropriately dealt with. And it's these controversies are being tossed on the table of the American table, with many other things going on, economic situation, this and that. People understand the danger of these issues.
Well, not at all. But I think the bigger danger that they don't understand is that this is a long, slow hemorrhage of American resources and of American power in fighting all of these little diplomatic and military conflicts on the rim of Eurasia. That are going to slowly bleed us to death. We do not have the GDP and the manpower to fight on all these fronts at the same time. I think the time is really becoming right to return to a kind of paleoconservative isolationism. Now, there's a danger in that as well, that if you do get some sort of strongman like a Putin who manages to get control of Western Europe because NATO folds, and he decides just to keep on coming, then the Eurasian landmass, especially if you throw in Africa, would have the ability to take everything in the Americas. This is the principle that was set forth by Sir Halford Mackinder over 100 years ago, the heartland theory, and that's what appeared to be driving Hitler. And it's also what I think drove Roosevelt in pushing back and with the Atlantic Charter, for instance, and ultimately the United Nations. But I just don't think that we've got the wherewithal in terms of national will or population or money or resources to fight like that forever. I think we do have the ability to safeguard our own backyard. All this money that we have been pouring into the Middle East and into NATO, if we poured that into a massive nation-building campaign in Mexico, for instance, to secure our southern border that way and turn Mexico into a stable and prosperous country with better living conditions, a higher standard of living, I think that would do a lot more for us than continuing to face off against Russia and China, especially since China shows no signs of slowing down. Its economy is booming, its technology is advancing tremendously. 80 or 100 years from now, China's clearly going to be on top. And I think we are just going to beggar ourselves by trying to keep up with them.
Well, what's the correct policy? I wonder about Mexico. In other words, do you think, just the way humans are, that we're just going to make sure Mexico becomes powerful and strong? Don't you think there's some agreements they have against us? We took half their country, and the Mexicans or Latin American people that come here are in terrible circumstances. Bad things happen, and they're very proud people. And would there not be they would not necessarily be an ally? I would say that.
Well, they are. You talk as of course we took half their country. We dragged them into an alley and mugged them.
Yes.
But they're taking that back as we speak, and they are taking it back very largely in the same way that we took the continent to begin with. And it was not on the battlefield. It was in the bedroom. that the population's growing, that they pour across this porous border, that they are unlike the immigrants from Europe because we're contiguous. They've brought their culture with them. They are staying true to their culture rather than mixing it up in the salad bowl or melting pot of America. Yes, everything that we think of as good about America, the Protestant work ethic, mutual toleration, civil liberties, all of these things could be challenged if we do not work to socialize immigrants from Latin American better into the American system.
So really, as we look in this, maybe I mentioned the problems Russia has, geographical difficulties. Mm-hmm. We have similar problems, don't we? So if we want to punch it out on the world stage, there are lots of problems we have, and one of them is the great, you could say diversity is a strength. Well, okay. I mean, it certainly has that part to it, but it also is a defect. So if you have people that have anger against each other, different histories, they don't feel like they're part of the same place, then the national power is diminished, rather like the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Mm-hmm. You had a country that had many different ethnic groups that did not meld together, and so indeed the history. The painful history of the past, of the way the country was put together, leave many groups appropriately aggrieved, and it's hard to work all that out. It's a very difficult arrangement, and you could see right now people say, "What's the U.S.? It's on the wrong path." Many people say that, so the country right now doesn't seem psychologically ready to punch it out anywhere as far as that goes. I mean. Just policing the Mexican border seems impossible. The whole structure of the country is a little bit unraveled, and not a good candidate. Maybe that's good. It'll keep us out of war. We feel like we're too weak to punch it out. And you'd imagine you'd have to. If we're going to fight in the Ukraine. We're going to institute draft. We're going to whatever it is. I mean, this is going to be, we're going to lose 400,000 people.
Patently ridiculous to even contemplate. America would not stand for that.
Well, they have to. So in other words, what happens if Putin just goes off the reservation, just goes crazy? This is he's in his mind, who knows what his stability issue is. It seems like he's attempting to recreate the glories of World War II, of throwing the Nazis out and then pushing the Soviet Union border back aggressively, and inevitably, if he attempts to do that, I mean, there would be war.
Well, war with whom?
Western Europe.
Okay.
NATO.
Well, Western Europe, yes. Would we honor our NATO commitments? Would other NATO countries?
Yes, they would.
Would England honor its NATO commitment to
so.
Poland or to, how about to Latvia? What if Putin says, I'm going to take Latvia right now, I'm going to go get them?
I think they would. I think they'd honor it. The same as where would the incursion be? With Finns? Would we help the Finns?
Yeah.
I think so. We're going to help the Poles? I think so.
Mm-hmm.
I mean.
Well, this is the domino theory idea that got us into Vietnam. And
lots of things got us into Vietnam.
Yeah, and that was one of the big arguments, and you see where that ended up. I guess my point being, going back to the open borders, open borders always create a threat to national security. And until fairly recently, we did not have that problem here. That the U.S.-Canadian border is the longest demilitarized border in the world.
Some occasionally the Canadians sneak across here,
but we have the same culture.
Right, I know it's
they
pretty benign. Pretty benign neighbors.
But Mexico now, its population's growing. It's got the different culture. It's not a stable country. We have two options. Number one, we can build that wall, or number two, we can try to build up Mexico into a prosperous, stable state and hope for the best. But that threat is there. I would argue it's a greater threat than if Latvia gets overrun.
Well, on that note, you've given us a lot to think about, Buck. But we'll talk some more next time. So thank you for being here.
Indeed.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well, good.
This program is brought to you by the Georgia Neurosurgical Institute. For over 50 years, rendering neurosurgical care to patients of all social conditions, treating complicated problems involving the brain, spine, spinal cord, and peripheral nerves, endeavoring to encourage quality care, medical research, innovation, and education on a local, national, and international basis.